I was going back to Europe in the early 80s to do a mini-series. I was living in America at the time. And I'd received from a fan a couple of scripts, one on the life of Boswell, and one was this slim book saying, if you're ever interested in a character, you might want to read this book. It was a Lovejoy book, Lovejoy novel. I'd never heard of them. I read it on the plane over and was struck by its relevance as a TV show. It had the qualities that I think they still look for now of a comedy drama, which is a great genre that appeals to all ages of a family. And I read it, liked it, and I had lunch with the author, Johnathon Gash, which is a pseudonym. He's a very well-respected, known doctor of tropical medicines. And so we had lunch, and he was fascinated by it, and I knew I wanted to write it. A friend of mine, Ian McShane, and Dick Clement, who I'd known for years, who worked with a producing partner at the time, was also a friend of mine, Alan McEwen. And I sent this to Alan, and Ian sat down and dashed out an outline, the Bible for the show. The book had characters. The only characters that were in the book originally were myself and Tinker. Eric was an invention of Ian's, which I think is great, which is like, the idiot, you can use it any time, but he's really a good guy to do the errands, and he's also, you can teach him things about the business. And Lady Jane, the Lady Jane character, which was an amalgam of certain characters in the books, who is like the posh, bitter stuff, who they really love each other, will they, won't they never do, because once you do it, you've broken that spell between you and the audience. And we were lucky enough to get, three terrific actors, Dudley Sutton, Chris Jury, and the lovely Phyllis Logan to play those characters. And the other character, which is in the books originally, but we only did 3 series with him because, I don't quite know why now, of Gimbert, who's the man you love to hate, like the on-off villain, the new money guy who only likes antiques because of what he can get out of them. Whereas Lovejoy is in it because he's a divvy and he has this romantic attachment and his heart flutters and he gets excited, and he's not in it for his own gain, he's in it for the love of the chase and the love of the antique area itself. And so we did the first series in '85. And then with Jonathan Powell. And then there was like a hiatus. Contractual problems came in after that. And Alan and I decided to sort of lay back on it for a few years. And then Jonathan Powell was made controller of BBC One and asked us back in '89 and said, listen, that show, I really don't think we explored it fully. Are you both free? And we said yes, and we went back in '89 with the same cast again, 1990, and did further 5 successful seasons, and that's why we're sitting here today talking about it. It was on around the time that Antiques Roadshow had been on for a while. It sort of invigorated that program and gave us a boost. We used to do a sort of a little tie-in now and again with it. But it was also the first ever real independent show done with the BBC, because they didn't own it. When we did it, then we sort of set the template for an independent production, and then they came more and more in the 90s, But it was funny. I mean, God bless them, though, one thing. Once you do a show, when we did the second, they left you alone. They didn't ever interfere. They let you do what you wanted. They never had any they didn't overlook you in editing or whatever. I think when we made the first series, I don't think anybody knew what to make of it. I think we were just making a 10-part series in England. And the nice thing about being in England is, there's a lot less, well, there was then, back in the 80s, a lot less celebrity madness than there is now, which is anybody that's, appeared on television. Everybody's appeared on television, or everybody should do. Then, so you were just doing a TV show. And it came out, I would think when it came out the following year, I was already back here doing something else. And contractually, we ran into a kind of a snafu, which wasn't resolved for 3 years until we could take up the series again. So series 1 was, in a way, a great unknown dry run. It came out, it did fine. But it wasn't given by the BBC a kind of a big hoopla. I didn't go over there and do a lot of press for it. It came out and was already we were working towards other areas. But it was always at the back of our mind. It was an experience. We'd done it. Actually, it gave me a background in, you know, and now producing a show. I hadn't directed one then. But when we came back again in 1990, it was the knowledge that, and then the second series showed again. They showed the first series again, then they showed the second series, 91, and of course it took off and we had like, the first series went into like 15, 16 million viewers, whatever. Which was, and I felt, yeah, your faith in the show was well-founded, and we were all very happy by it. And we went on from there, and I don't think we became slack about the show. I think we tried to change the show each year, make the characters funnier. We didn't just rely on the same kind of, churn out the same show all the time, which in some may be one of the weaknesses, because people do like the same thing all the time. We didn't. We tried to move location each year, give him another point of view, mature the characters a little, bring in the character of Gimbert again, Malcolm Tierney's character, but all the time never losing sight of the fact that Lovejoy, as the quote you gave me before from the New York Times book review, was basically broke, was a bit of a conniver, a bit of a liar, but loved women, but loved above all antiques, and they brought out in something else. They did bring, antiques are what brought him to life. Yeah, and I think that's what he could not live without that. I think we managed to capture that in the character in the show, that was the love of his life. They called me and said, I remember saying, Dudley, they said Dudley Sutton, who I knew. I said he'd be marvelous, Dudley. Chris I didn't know, but I went with the instincts of Alan, and we had a terrific director who did the first shows, which was Baz Taylor. And Phyllis I'd seen in that wonderful film where she played Another Time, not Another Time, Another Place. I think it was about a Scottish housewife who fell in love with an Italian prisoner of war during World War II. She's a marvelous actress. I think she brought an enormous amount of the program. Class and fun, and her quality of being very straight. An audience could identify with it. There was nothing sleazy about her relationship with Lovejoy, although he would have liked to have made it a little more sleazy than it was. The first series of any show is you're finding the way. You're finding the template for if you're serious about doing a television series, for the next 5 years. I mean, I think 5 years is a good round number. Because American television has always done more than England, but we insisted, Alan and I, on doing at least 12 a year with a special. So we ended up with 75 hours of television, which for an English series is remarkable. I mean, you think that, Fawlty Towers only has 8. People think it's always more, but we had 75 hours. I mean, I think there was about 3 or 4 specials, and then 70 hours of regular program. Luckily, when we came back again in 1990, Dudley and Chris and Phyllis were all available. And I think it was kind of nice. In some ways, it worked for you. We knew each other very well. We'd had 3 years of where we all loved it and came back. And it was, excuse me, how we came back. So obviously we put him in prison. He'd been away for a crime he did not commit, obviously. Lovejoy is not a criminal. He's a bit dodgy, but he's on the side of the angels. And that first episode, which when we came back, was with Anthony Valentine, terrific, who played who had put me in it, as they say. And then we were off and running again. And then it gave us the ability to discover Phyllis again in the house and get him a new car, because in the first series, I'd always hated that Volvo. That was the Volvo. It was funny, I remember the first series, I came back, and I was filming something in America, so I only got to England about 3 weeks before the show started, the first series, because I was involved from a distance then. It was just contractually, it was impossible to get over there before that. And they got this Volvo. I said, a Volvo? Oh, God, no. And of course, most English antiques people drive, they do, it's true, it's the old Volvo station wagon. Anyway, I hated it. I haven't got anything against a Volvo, it's one of those cars that has an image about it. So we spent the entire series trying to find a way to kill it, which we finally did, and drove it over a cliff in episode 10 or whatever we did. And then we had the following time when we came back in 1990, we discovered Lady Jane's old car, which is the Morris Minor convertible, which I think was a stroke of genius. I think it was Lafreniere came up with that and calling it Miriam, it was his name. And that was one of those things that just worked great. And I think we auctioned it off after about 3 series when she finally came back again as a nice gift for somebody. I think it's fair to say that Tinker's Lovejoy's conscience. At times, I remember that maybe 3 or 4 episodes a year, Lovejoy would do something which Tinker would shy away from, and would point out the moral obligations that he had through his haze of alcohol. And there's a deep love there. You don't know whether it could be his older brother, his uncle. The relationship is never defined only in terms of the affection that they feel for each other, and they're bound together by a mutual love of antiques and by the restraint that sometimes Tinker's personality can put on Lovejoy, when Lovejoy would be rash and would charge and so. Of course, he doesn't succeed all the time, Tinker, but he puts forward the argument. One thing we tried to give Lovejoy, that the ease of being with anybody, that Lovejoy could mix with hoi polloi, middle class, commoner, whatever class distinction you like to put on anybody. Lovejoy was there being himself, which is why when we had the wedding, he said, what's he going to wear for the wedding? And Lovejoy's idea of dress up, which of course has now been copied, I'm glad to say, by haute couture, was we gave him an evening jacket with jeans and cowboy boots. But at the time, it was like, that was Lovejoy's idea of dressing up. Kept his jeans on, but just put a, quick after 6, and a bow tie on and a cowboy, and that was it. Before we started Lovejoy Series 2 in 1990, I did a stint on Dallas here, got to know nice people, all of them. And I worked a lot with Linda Gray. So in the second year, when we came back in 91 and 92, did Lovejoy, it was a 2-hour special. I invited Linda across to play the character. She was great. And we also had Ken Kirchabel, 2 years later, Ken, Cliff Barnes, as he's better known, to come and play the plantation owner when we did the show set in North Carolina. Both good actors, both two nice people. I mean, that's great, that's the nice thing. If you worked in other shows, you remember people from your past you can call on. Like we had Sir John, when we had Frank Finley. We had some great guest stars, not just in the specials, but in the regular shows. I mean, that was it. The quality of actors you got in that show was quite terrific. I think we paid quite well as well. But it was written well. The guest stars were written rounded characters. Brian Blessed, the only man that could play that part. He'd just come back from climbing Everest, or nearly climbing Everest for the second time. And Brian's always useful to have on a set. There's never a dull moment. He was wonderful. He was with Linda Gray, and he played the, I think was he a Greek or a Russian in this? It was a mixture. Anyway, he was terrific, yeah. Tom Wilkinson played the painter, Ashley Wilkes. He goes around painting cottages, and that's his in with the women. He was a character close to Lovejoy's heart, another, a Lothario with his oils. And that was the famous scene in the bar where we all sang the Tara's theme, I think, yeah. I remember a particular episode when we had 3 great guest stars, which was the Italian Venus, which apart from being beautifully written, was beautifully performed by Patrick Malahide and Ian McShane and Celia Imrie, which was very class-written episode. And wonderful because it was in the garden and it was in bits, and the shell was in one. There's certain episodes that stand out. The first one I ever directed, which was Eric of Arabia, which was about Brough motorcycles. We had these Broughs on the set, these motorbikes, which were incredible. I mean, they're worth $250,000 each. We had about 4 of them. One of them that T. Lawrence of Arabia, I would have flogged it as the one that he actually killed himself in, but it wasn't. But obviously, those are the bikes he rode on. So you've got to explore a whole. I mean, antiques, not just. I mean, we did some shows about architectural antiques. We went down and did a show about another particular favorite when we did the Submariner one. We went down and Portsmouth and filmed aboard the submarine from World War II. There's some fantastic things. So you got to learn a lot on that show. He's too obsessed. And he's also a television character, which you've got to keep him. You've got to keep him a solitary guy. So you've got all the options every year to do with what you want. So you try and make, but what we tried to do was make him a father that loved his daughter, but obviously was feckless, hopeless with money, which is married out of his class, because we tried to make his mother, obviously, Lovejoy does like a bit of upper class totty, as they say. And I've always wanted to give the impression of Lovejoy. You look at the guy and you think, why is this guy with long hair and a leather jacket living in the middle of Suffolk? He must be hiding from something. And that was what I want, giving the sense of being an outsider at the same time, that he wasn't a regular kind of, suede, booted, yellow sock wearing, tweed jacketed Heather. Yes, a typical antique dealer, or one that you'd see on Antiques Roadshow. Somebody different who came to it another way. And that was one thing from the books, because it's never described. But in the book, he's a rough character. And he knows a lot of people in various areas, which is, so he's an outsider, and keep him the outsider quality, which gives you the chance to do all sorts of other things within the context of the show, without seeming suddenly out, why is he suddenly doing that? So you give the character the outside quality, and having been married, you've introduced his wife. He's not a terrible father, it's just not cut out for it. Tries his best, it doesn't work. But he tries to do his best with it. When we had the series when his daughter, wasn't it I think it's the pornographic, when his daughter's public school, isn't it, they're involved with pornographic pictures, they have this pornographic collection, which is it's erotic. It's a very funny idea, having, the school that has this wonderful pornographic collection. It's a girls' school. Makes for great fun. And we had a female producer come in who decided that we wanted a bit more sex for Lovejoy. I was quite happy. She said, we've got to get him a lot more sex. We'll go. Joanna Lumley in the 3 episodes, so they bring her in as a sort of a foil. Of course, it's all fated to end in disaster, which it does. Joanna, she's lovely, because my wife had done a stage play with her the 2 years before, which is what made me think of her. But she's gone on then. She wasn't doing much at the time. It sort of rebirthed her career in a way. Friends in High Places, that was right, yes. Oh, yeah. It ended with a very funny telephone conversation to the palace about something, I think, with pretending that one of the members of the royal family was on the other end of the line. And then we had another great show, which we did with the pop band, when we had the very good Irish band, Hot House Flowers, who came in. And again, that didn't seem too far-fetched to have a rock band in it. It was kind of part of the show, because they're not really a rock band. They're sort of a multicultural band. I mean, they're very much of origin of an Irish band, but they just went out into rock and roll. No, that was a good show. A divvy is known in antique circles as somebody who can place an object, if it's real or false, because it sets off certain emotional or chemical reactions in the body. Johnathon Gash writes in the books about him, sometimes Lovejoy gets these, like the heart tends to beat quicker. Sudden, it's like a panic attack can happen, or the head goes off. It's various, you're in the presence of something from the ages. That's a divvy. Whether they actually do exist or not, I think they do, but you can make up your own mind. I don't have that huge an interest in antiques. I like paintings, I like old paintings, old furniture, which is what Lovejoy really loves, never appealed to me. And Lovejoy really loves, in the books, that's his big, he loves antique furniture. That's his thing, which really gets his heart racing when he sees something that's wonderful. It gave me an insight into a lot of it. There was one very funny remark once. We were recceing a location in a country home, and it did have some spectacular paintings in it. And we had this funny locations guy from the BBC, was this classic, hello, is that I'm from the location? And he introduced us to the woman around the house, and she said very offhand, we were walking through one room, she said, I do hope you'll be careful. If he's, oh, madam, the BBC is insured for £50 million. She said, well, that'll cover this room. And he, as she pointed to the Velasquez and the picture on the walls, sort of made you feel, put him in his place a little. Chris Jury brought a terrific comedic sense, I thought, to Eric. the naivety and the kind of doltishness, but lovability. But also the character enabled Lovejoy, when he was explaining stuff, to use the character of Eric, who he took on as ostensibly his apprentice, because his dad, but you know, his dad paid Lovejoy to keep him out of trouble and whatever, and gave him free meat. I think it was a butcher, wasn't he? Yeah, his dad. And so Lovejoy could explain things which normally, you know, the device sometimes would work when I spoke to camera, but the device would sometimes be giving information in a program, which I think Lovejoy did give out a lot of good information about antiques, but not in a boring way. And it wasn't like saying, and now we have a 19th century escritoire, which was built. He could do it in a way that Eric would say, what's this, Lovejoy? Oh, I mean a writing desk, or you mean that, or it would be a conversation, very funnily written by Ian McShane, one of the other writers, that would give information out without appearing that it was just information being out. It would be a comedy scene, but within that, there'd be light and shade about the characters while giving you some serious chat about antiques. Also because he was learning, you know, because Eric would say, I'm supposed to be learning from you, Lovejoy. My dad's paying you good money to teach me about antiques. Now, you don't teach me. And I think Chris gave it a great boost to my character. And I could go on for now. And which brings me back to the camera thing, which I don't think people realized in the first series, that I did actually, was one of the first cameras on TV, to talk to the camera. But you always try to make it as part of the, you know, as if I'm talking to you now, naturally talking to you off camera. Then you just turn, you go, and back again. The audience would say, did he just talk to the camera? It wouldn't be like an obvious thing of I'm now going to talk to the camera. You try and build it into the show. And that would be another way of giving the audience information or bringing the audience on your side. I think Lovejoy was a good example of something that television does very well, which I don't think films can really exploit, that kind of comedy drama, which is a difficult genre, and actually more difficult to play than you think. Drama usually gets all the, you know, gosh, it was so marvelous. But having not done at that time, and one of the reasons I wanted to do Lovejoy was to do something that was lighter than normal, than I was used to. And I loved it. I had a great time. It was a good show. The scripts were good. We paid well. And we had a good time. I think it had a good reputation as a show to do. And that's the most important thing. So people were attracted to it, and it came on. And when you do a show, I mean, your guest stars are your bread and butter. You say, come on, bring what you do. Minnie Driver. Now, Minnie, we liked so much Minnie that we filmed her scene twice. Actually, it was funny, because the first time it didn't come out. They had a technical problem, so they brought her back again. Gorgeous creature. And she played my daughter's friend at school. My God, is that long ago? Minnie. I always remember because she said, my mum and dad had a sense of humor. She said, because they were hippies, my mum and dad. I said, well, obviously they called you Minnie. She said, yeah, but my brother's called Laurie. So Minnie and Laurie Driver, that's not bad. It's an appealing story, isn't it? No, they wrote one in once, I'll forget, in a letter. There was a letter addressed to my character, and somebody put, I said, what was this E on the front? Said, well, it's your name. I said, what do you mean? He doesn't have a name. Well, he's got to have a name. I said, no, don't, and there's no address, it's just Lovejoy. Suffolk, if you want to put Lovejoy Suffolk, it'll get to him somehow. No, it never had a name. Apart from when we did a 2-hour special with, we had Sir John Gielgud, who was wonderful, in the episode that we went to America on. And he insisted on calling me Love Boy from time to time, which I didn't object to, being Sir John. But it was very funny. Oh, yes, Love Boy. I said, no, it's Lovejoy. Oh, whatever, it doesn't matter, really does. Which was sweet. Pavel Douglas, who played Alexander, Lady Jane's long-suffering husband, was terrific. I mean, he used to say, brought me in again. What am I about? I'm going to be boring again. No, Pavel, you're going to be Lady Alexander, who have this uneasy... He knows nothing's going on. We made him the haughty character he was. But I think we did good by him because they didn't cheat on him. Lovejoy never cheated on never cheated on Lady Jane. They didn't have a relationship. There was nothing to cheat on, excuse me. He would have done. I think they came near it once in Scotland, and Eric appeared on his motorbike and sidecar and broke the mood completely when he and Lady Jane could have been about to do the deed. And I think we made it at the end, even though he cheated on Lady Jane. Actually, I think he did in an episode. At the end, yes. Yeah, he does. She comes back. You don't put them together again, which is interesting. You have a chance to put Jane and Lovejoy together again after Alexander's cheated on her and left her, but no, because it's too late. It's too late. It's gone past them. They'll always love each other, Lady Jane and Lovejoy. But the time has come and the time has gone. One of the most important things each year was to try and start it afresh, that it just wasn't lumbered. He was always moving around that area of what do you call it? The edge of Essex up into Suffolk, not into Norfolk, but that area. Also, it's a strange area there because it's the only part of England that's ever been invaded. It's the part that when we've been invaded, we've always been invaded from there. So it's got a lot of it's kind of eerie there, and it's very flat. It's big sky country. Those winds come across from Russia. It's got some fantastic houses there. People would say constantly, when you meet them, somebody would suddenly say, "Oh, you filmed at mine. You must remember that wonderful house you filmed in." And I'd say, quite honestly, I'd say, I really don't mean to be rude, but we filmed in so many unbelievable houses there. I mean, incredible. There's a lot of money in Britain, you forget about that. I mean, there are some incredible houses, like three an episode. We must have filmed in 200 unbelievable houses of various kinds, dotted on, only in that part of the world. There's a lot of me in it, having found the show in the first place. Obviously, you want to project yourself a lot of your personality, which I saw in the book. You'd like to think yourself as a well-rounded human being, which, Lovejoy is up to a point. The writers gave, when you play a character on television, you can't go outside too much. In other words, you within the frames of what that character is. Because you're telling a story every week, you want people to understand him and grow with him. It's about a certain genre. It's what I said about not growing up. If suddenly Lovejoy has suddenly grown up and married, started wearing suits and had children, no. You want to keep them in that suspended animation state whereby they are always preserved as they are. It's like the classics, like dying young. It's like James Dean. Oh, no. Would you want to see James Dean at 70? Marilyn at 70? I don't think so. God knows I'm not comparing. I'm comparing the images of that. It's saying that they're of their time. To now bring Lovejoy back and say, yes, we could make him a married man. Forget it. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Which is why it was a fabulous time. Whether we come back or not, I don't think so. But it's a great thing to remember because it was a great show to do, and it was well loved by the public, and still is. I mean, it's very nice that UK Gold is one of their most successful shows, I think. The character Gimbert, played by Malcolm Tierney, always needs Lovejoy, and Lovejoy needs him. I think he had that great line in the first series when Gimbert turns to Lovejoy and said, "Since my wife died, Lovejoy, I need someone to hate." Which is it's a classic Ian McShane line, which explains everything about Gimbert and Lovejoy. And I'm having it off with his sister, who's got the tattoo on her ass, which he hasn't seen yet. And I said, "It's a lovely tattoo, though, Charlie. It's a butterfly." And he goes berserk. When we came back again, Malcolm was doing something. Gimbert wasn't in Series 2. So we're going to come out from prison so that we could give Lovejoy the excuse of finding a new place to live, finding a new car, finding a new hairstyle, which is what... Because I remember in Series 1, I'd come from doing something about World War II. That my hair was very short in Series 1, which is never the way I saw Lovejoy. But we sort of dressed him up, so by the time when we came back again, the sort of character was fully formed, which is why I gave him this sort of long hair, out of time. So you look at him, you think he looks a bit like a 70s, 80s... He's in his element, Why's he got that long hair then? But that was part of it. Are you leading me somewhere in this conversation? Are you leading me into the certain person who's now trying to... You're leading me into somebody who's been trying to get me on television with him for about 5 years and will never succeed. I refuse to mention his name, but he has a sort of the only thing he's got in common with Lovejoy is his hair, which is a lot greyer than Lovejoy's. And he's got a sort of a permatan, hasn't he? No, I don't know who that person is, but God bless him, whoever he is. I think one of the strengths of the show was because Antiques Roadshow was so popular at the time. And we went out at the same kind of time on a Sunday night. They didn't cross over, but it was sort of, now you have the factual part, you know, people find out something that's been in their attic for 30 years. Granny had left them. But that show, and I've always thought, is purely about greed. It's about how much, it's only worth, screw Auntie who left it them, you know, she didn't leave me anything worthwhile. But a proliferation of shows have happened since then. Because it's an area that people, you never know about. You never know what you've got. And you can find something, and who knows? It happens, and it happens all the time. People come across something, and it's worth money, or in whatever, be it some strange game or some weird painting that they picked up in some flea market somewhere, whatever. And people love a bargain, and people live for chance. That's why that's why they buy the lottery each week. That's why they go down flea markets. That's why they go in antique shops. You never know. The guy, the odds are stacked against you most of the time, but that one time, you don't know. That's why Lovejoy would be the kind of he'd be the classic example of, he'd be banned from most places because he can tell the real thing. It's like a professional gambler being banned from playing, a game in Vegas. You can't play here, Lovejoy. You can't come in here. You can't have a say in this. Here in America, it was shown on A&E. It was their top show for a while. And they always say they got the wrong market in Australia, which they was. They picked the wrong market. That was one of the great complaints about people when they sold the show. I forget, people would go, they picked the wrong market. They should have sold it to this. It was in about 35, 40 countries. And as I said, I'm glad now that the DVD's coming out, so people will get a chance who've never seen it before, get a chance to, at their leisure, they can watch it whenever they want. We did a show called Color of Money, which is obviously, it's about snooker, based on the same title of the Paul Newman, Tom Cruise movie. And we had Dennis Taylor, the former world champion, and Alex Norton played the crazed snooker player who was managed by Charlie Gimbert. Martin Clunes played it was the search for Queen Mary the Scots billiard table. And it was I loved that script. It was completely mad but wonderful. And it gave Phyllis and me a chance to do a lot together in that because we went looking for it together. And she had some great stuff to do, I remember, around the on location we had. When she gets very excited relating the story of Mary's death. That was a good show. I've got such good memories of a lot of them. They sitting here talking, they sort of come back when you think about them. Johnathon Gash, who created the character Lovejoy and Tinker, tended to make them. I don't think they were as funny. We brought more humor into them. They tended to be more an author's entitled to do whatever he wants. It's his book. But they were more like, he was always whacking policemen, Lovejoy, or getting into sort of scrapes that were unnecessary, and which tended to, I think, to be flights of fancy from the author's point of view, more than if you're doing a television show. And you have to change things. You don't just put the page on the screen. Certain things you do. So you made him. He had a relationship with the law. They liked him. They knew he wasn't really a villain, but he often got in scrapes with them. But he didn't go around every time he had a drink, clobbering one in a pub or what have you. So Ian McShane brought that comedy drama to it for a television audience and made it in that the right timing, that hour, 8 o'clock time, which is perfect on a Sunday night, which is why I think it works so well, because it appealed to the whole family. I got get letters from kids now who grew up with it, and they liked it, and they said I get a letter from somebody who said, my mum and dad used to make me watch it. I couldn't stand it. And now I've been watching it on UK Gold, and I really like it again. No, it's funny. It's sweet. Shows are judged in the end by the writing. Hugely important. And we did have terrific writers on that. I'm not going to go through all the names because you'll see them all. But we tried to bring in one new writer every year. But Ian didn't write after the first, until they wrote a special and they wrote the last episode, Ian McShane. Who created the Bible for the show. But we did have a base of writers that went through the show, and they created their own shorthands. And at the time, they'd play games with names, people, characters. And once writers feel free and relaxed within their genre, they can have a good time with what they do. What was great is that about the scripts is that you tried to make them as varied as possible, so they weren't always about the same thing. And the writers were grounded in antiques. And all the stuff that came out in the show was actually verified and true. All the stuff, all the information about people. I mean, and the nice thing is, wherever I've been to, like Palm Springs here sometimes, and the guy was in the waters of one of those spas down there, and the guy goes, "Lovejoy, I have an antique shop in what." Now, antique, it's one of those shows antique dealers like, because you told stories, and they love stories. There are a million stories, and there are a million more. You would never run out of material for the show. And we only gave away half the secrets. I mean, it's one of the great import-export businesses of the world. I mean, there's more money to be made in it, you know. Have you seen the prices? Go to Melrose Avenue down here and see what they charge, see what they ask for. Oh, yes, made by Mayan Indians in 720. Sure it was, yeah. Sure. I say I wouldn't know a chip and nail from a chip pan. We did 75 episodes, and you're talking about 4 regulars. You got a minimum of maybe 15 other people in the cast. So you multiply, 15 by 75. You got probably made work for 2,000 actors. Weren't repeated, which were never repeated through the show. Apart from my wife, who did Series 1, Gwen, who did Series 1, played twins in 1985, and then came back for the last series and played the mad wife of an English lord on a motorbike. Yes. The last of the Uscocks, which was the episode I directed in the last series, which was one of my favorite scripts. Which actually, that script was a funny story, because in the end it was like, it became so complicated working out this script that this original book of the Uscocks, who were the Uscocks, we decided. I mean, sometimes you decide to. The writer said, "Well, make the whole thing a fake. There's nothing real about anybody." I mean, it happened in another series, I think, about a Bible with Richard Bryars, which is about the fake Bible. In the end, they couldn't find the real one, because sometimes, when you're doing mystery stories, they become so much. It's the classic case of when they did The Big Sleep, apparently, when the director phoned up Chandler and said, "Who did this, by the way?" He said, "I have no idea who did it. Can't you read the book?" So, "Well, you wrote it." He said, "I don't know. The characters are more appealing. Maybe nobody did it." You forget you have so many MacGuffins in the story, you forget actual who did it, or who did not do it becomes immaterial. The story becomes important itself. And that was the spirit of Lovejoy. I wanted to get more involved on the other side of the business for a time. I was here doing with movies, films of the week, and I was looking for something to get involved, but something, and I think it's lucky. I think, being an actor, if you're in work, you're lucky most of the time. I mean, there's a lot of actors I know that dramas go with who never even cracked through, who were terrific, I thought, at the time. So to have read that Lovejoy novel seemed fortuitous somehow. And I called him. The thing is following through, and I followed through on it. And at the time, Ian McShane's been a friend of mine for, 30, 35 years. He was the perfect guy to write it. Alan McCune was looking to do something with the BBC. I was looking to move back in another area. It was fortuitous. It came off. I look back on it with huge affection. I still am in contact with most of the cast from time to time. Dudley, Chris, Phyllis. It was a very agreeable show to do. We had some wonderful guest stars on it. It established me in another way back in England, and it established me in a way that about getting to know about more than just being in front of the camera. And I directed some of them. My producing credit on it was more to do with shaping the scripts and seeing to it every year that side. As to being a showrunner, I wasn't that. I mean, but very few actors do that. You have somebody to run the production of the show. And the BBC were most cooperative in that sense. We had to be assigned a producer every year. And we came in, under budget. We did our best. The shows went out. They were very successful for the amount of time. We did 6 seasons. And I'm just glad now they're coming out on DVD. I thought about it a couple of years ago and inquired. And here we sit today. The BBC was searching for an identity. And part of the problem, which not the problem with the BBC with the show was it was never their show. It was our show. It was McShane Productions and Witsend Productions with the BBC, and they left us alone. But they were never sure to call it. It wasn't their show, and they used to sort of put the show around on a Sunday night schedule, like at 7:30, 7 o'clock, and that's the days when ITV, it was funny. They threw everything at us for a few years. They brought back they used to start Sunday night films at 6:30. They put on the 2-hour TV movie, and then they'd throw this at you one season, then they'd throw next year at you, and eventually they found a show which sort of combated us. I mean, didn't sink us, because after 5 years I said that was it. I was out of there. Was Heartbeat, which is still going on, but Heartbeat is a generic show of, what is it? It's a 60s show, and not to be. I love you, Nick Berry. In fact, I do love Nick Berry. he's a friend of mine. But it was a show about nostalgic pop tunes in the 60s stuck to a sort of a gentle Sunday night in Yorkshire. No, it's the same show every week in, week out. But we finished after 5 years, which is when I wanted to. We did 5 years of it, and it was great. And we weathered all the slings and arrows of outrageous ITV, and I'm glad we did it. Various times they've talked about doing it again, coming back as a special, which is the way I considered doing it. Now and maybe I'd like to. Who knows? I'm probably still wearing the same jacket, still driving the same old Toyota pickup truck, going around somewhere. He's a creature of habit and a good guy. I don't think he's got ambitions. That's his great strength and probably one of his great failings, that his ambitions they're drawn in lines of, I like to live life first, ambition comes afterwards. And if a good antique comes along in the meantime, God bless it. And he doesn't want to own antiques, Lovejoy. Lovejoy never wanted to own anything. A thing of beauty stood for itself, like antiques or women. He was fond of women, he was fond of antiques, not antique women. Don't let's get those confused. He was very much partial to the fairer sex. And he did like a drink. And he liked the good things in life. But he liked to be free. He liked to be his own man. And, he wasn't an angel all the time, but he was on the side of the angels. And I like to believe that he had a sense of integrity and character. And that's what appealed to me to play him every year in various guises, wherever he was living. However, if he'd lost his money the year before, he'd set himself up the next year. And he was committed, and he was a very enthusiastic character. Lovejoy didn't get down on things. He represented optimism and life, which I think was part of the appeal of the program. Yeah, and it was exemplified by the other people. And it was a bit like The Simpsons. They never got older. I think Lovejoy would still be celebrating his 41st birthday somewhere in the world. My wife's American, Gwen, and we lived here, and I was going back, and I'd gone back and forth between here and here being Los Angeles, as we said now, and London for many years, and combined a sort of successful career on both sides of the Atlantic. Lovejoy really did take me away for a time from LA, and then because I used to sort of take a break at the end of the year. I mean, we'd start in May and go right through till December. Then I'd take a holiday. I'd come here, back to LA. We kept a home here at the time, and then I'd do maybe a movie but it was more difficult then. But at the end of Lovejoy, when Lovejoy finished, I think the crunch comes if you realize I took myself away from television. I did another series after that, which I produced and did, Madsen, about a lawyer, 6-parter. And then I did a couple of specials, but Soul Survive, which I produced, about a guy who goes searching for his favorite rock band, which was great fun to do with that. We had Isaac Hayes in it, and some American, for his favorite American soul band, I should say, called Soul Survivors. And that was shown here on Showtime television. But you really, because television burns you up a little bit. And I decided not to stay away from it after that. So after 96, I sort of took myself out of television, said no more television for a while. I did some plays and a movie. Then in 99, I did Sexy Beast, which became a cult film in a funny way. especially here in USA. And which led to doing Deadwood, which is another television series which I'm about to do now, which for HBO. It's about to open. So who knows, that could be another 6 years. I was sitting in England, and last year, when was it now? No, in 2002, I just finished Trust, a series with Robson Green I did for the BBC, again, about corporate lawyers. And my agent said, they've come back, do you want to do a screen test for us? Well, you get rather obvious, you don't do screen tests. He said, well, it's a script by David Milch, it's been directed by Walter Hill. I said, well, where do we go? Where do we talk about this? And I read the script, which was extraordinary. And I did the screen test, and they flew me out here, met with Walter and David and HBO, and 3 weeks later we were filming Deadwood, the pilot. They picked it up in January 2003, and we filmed it all of 2003, finished in February 2004, and it opens the end of March. And it's quite a show. It follows The Sopranos, and it's Gunsmoke it ain't, put it that way. It's a revisionist Western in a way about what life was like, what life could have been like in 1876 in a gold strike town like Deadwood, which is not a town, I beg your pardon. It was a camp on Indian territory, which means they're really all there illegally, but they're forming a society where there's not been anyone before. And for every guy who's there for legitimate reasons, be it a miner or be it a businessman, there's 10 hustlers waiting to take his money from him. And at the height, there was like 5,000 people living there. My character, Swearingen, who runs the dope and the whores and the booze, as he says, I've been a booze pharaoh and pussy man my entire career, that's what he does, was taking in $5,000 a day in 1876. And so there was money to be made in them there hills, as they say. And it's been great, and we should start series 2 in the summer. I've been very lucky in many different, kinds of light comedy, Lovejoy, drama, Deadwood, but it also has its light moments. I mean, it's not, because it's David Milch, it's the guy who created NYPD Blue, so it goes through the spectrum of human behavior, which is any good show should. Lovejoy wasn't lightness all the time. I think it was, to go back to Lovejoy, I loved it when we brought Phyllis back, when he was about to get married for all the wrong reasons, and she comes back in his life, not to marry him, but for advice. There was some good... You're talking about the show now, I've been sitting here, I've got such great memories of it and doing it. It was a terrific show, Lovejoy. The Last Tango in Lavenham, I loved and hated because it was the last show, and because it had Phyllis, we brought back Phyllis for it. But also it was bittersweet because Lavenham is such a snobby... All respect, Lavenham, I love you, but you're the snobbiest town in the world. It was very funny. And I forget, because I've been staying in the hotel. And we used to move around locations, as I said, and I was in the Swan, the great hotel in Lavenham. I'd been staying in the hotel for 4 months. And they said, oh, Mr. McShane, next week we have a wedding coming in. And the suite's been booked for 4 months, so we'll have to ask you to move. I said, that's okay, move for the night. Well, I said, well, no, we have no room in the hotel. I said, excuse me? No, you'll have to move. I said, you're not offering me, I've been in this hotel for 4 months, you're asking me to leave? Yes, we don't have anywhere else. I said, fine, well, I'll leave now then. So I left then. That's very English, don't you find? Sort of a strange sidebar. So I love you, Lavenham, and I love you. It's never the end. I think, but the last line was, Lovejoy doesn't live here anymore, wasn't it? I seem to remember. Last Tango in Lavenham. We filmed it in Lavenham, which has got the most beautiful streets in the world. It's got all the great Anglo-Saxon churches outside it. It's the hub. It's the sort of social centre down there in Suffolk. Lady Jane came for tea. We had Phyllis's character came back. Phyllis came back for the show. It's where I dump Charlotte at the altar, take off in a helicopter, and leave and have the great line, and then come back in the car. And I think I said to camera, Lovejoy doesn't live here anymore. It's so. Has Lovejoy grown up? Is he leaving? Is he? It was a strange end. I haven't watched it for so long. Is it bittersweet? That's what we tried to make it. Bittersweet. Happy days. Well, I hope you enjoyed the shows. I've enjoyed making them. Doing these interviews have brought a lot of the fun and a lot of the pleasure back that I had at the original time when we did them. And I hope you've had as much pleasure watching them as I did making them. Thank you.